7. My name is Nicholas.
My name is Ben.
Today we'll be giving a presentation on the analysis of the traditional produce supply chain for iceberg lettuce compared to the revolutionary method of BrightFarms. For our analysis, we will be supporting the design of BrightFarms model due to being a cheaper, fresher, and tastier produce. What we will be encompassing will be the presentation is a supply chain comparison of a traditional supply chain of BrightFarms. We'll be discussing the key strategic advantages BrightFarms wishes to develop, show the fiscal advantages and disadvantages between the two models, discuss the non-financial advantages and disadvantages of supply chains, and finally discuss the facility and inventory obstacles that BrightFarms will need to overcome.
First, let's take a look at the traditional supply chain. The farmer in Fresno, California produces the iceberg lettuce. From there, it is moved to a storage center to be kept cool until trucks arrive for pickup. From there, the iceberg lettuce are wrapped up in sealed breath-away packaging in containers of 24 and are transported. It then travels 2,800 miles in temperature-controlled truck to the retailer in Pennsylvania and then to the consumer's household. Then we have BrightFarms model, which begins with the production of the iceberg lettuce at the local Bright Farm greenhouse in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. From there, it is cut, packaged to, and delivered 44 miles to the local retailer, where it is then sold to a customer. To talk more about the strategic advantages, here's Nick.
Thanks, Ben. The first strategic advantage BrightFarms possesses as opposed to the traditional farming system is the effectiveness to quickly respond due to the distance the retailers are to the actual place of production. Then there's the quality and inventory management. With the distance being less, the freshness and quality of the lettuce will be higher, having a longer shelf life and longer time before spoilage. Finally, with the quantity, with the utilization of hydroponic technologies, BrightFarms is able to produce 10 times as much produce per square foot. Now, the most important question, how much does it cost to produce a single head of iceberg lettuce? To begin the financial analysis, we're going to go through a few variables that both methods share. Truck capacity, 3,600 cubic feet. Crate size, 2.25 cubic feet. 40 pounds of per crate, with the max carry weight being 15,600 pounds. Of that, we take the max of both the size comparison and the size of the crates, and then we do also the same with the carry capacity, with the carry capacity maximum of a truck and the carry capacity maximum of the crate itself, of how much that crate weighs. When we take both of these numbers and do a bit of dividing and figure out how many crates per truck can we carry, we come up to 397 crates per truck, which is approximately 400. Next, we move on to the heads per shipment, which is 24 heads per crate. So when we multiply those two numbers together by the 397, we end up with 9,528. Looking at current information for how much it costs per mile for a truck, we have $2.43. And another common factor between both of them is the fact that we're going to compare the same size farm for each, meaning BrightFarms is going to be 1 acre's worth of land of that greenhouse, while with traditional farming it's going to be how much can we produce from 1 acre of traditional farm land. Moving on to the next slide, we have the total operationals cost. As you can see just by looking at it, BrightFarms is more expensive. The reason behind this is for harvesting. For the harvesting of the crops, because BrightFarms uses hydroponic technology, they're able to produce 10 times as many iceberg lettuce. What this means is that 10 times more means 10 times as much harvesting cost, which is why we get such a large quantity cost for operations. Then we move on to the next section, which is the managerial overhead. Traditional farms, they don't cost much to run for the management overhead of the business itself. They got a little bit of insurance costs, a little bit of liability costs. However, when it comes down to BrightFarms, having a greenhouse that's an acre in square feet, it costs about $360,000 to keep it running all year long, to keep that temperature at a consistent rate. And then we take that number and we take it by the cycle time of the days of harvest of 70 days. That's where we're getting a large amount of these managerial overhead costs from. The next part of this cost breakdown analysis is the transportation. So, as Ben mentioned earlier, 2,800 miles. That's a lot of miles, and it requires 2 trucks to carry all the inventory from 1 harvest. That is where we get this large number for the total cost for the traditional supply chain model. Then if we take a look at, let's just say, BrightFarms instead, they need 10 trucks to move, actually no, my apologies, 20 trucks to move all the produce from one location to the next. However, it's only 44 miles. So all in all, it's cheaper for BrightFarms to transport all that lettuce. The next step we move on to is for the total cost breakdown. Obviously, BrightFarms is going to cost more. They've got such a huge cost for manual overhead with the lighting cost. Then we have such a huge cost for the operations, for the harvesting, that yes, it's going to cost more. But at the same time, when you look at the figures, 6.1 times as much as what BrightFarms costs. But they're producing 10 times as much, which then brings it out for our price per lettuce head being for BrightFarms 73 cents, while the cost for the actual traditional produce supply chain being $1.13 to get it from California to Pennsylvania. We're more on the operational benefits. I hand this back to Ben.
Let's move on to the operational difference between BrightFarms and the traditional farming methods. The integrated pest management system through BrightFarms is a natural and affordable method of pest control. The hydroponic system works for efficient water recirculation. The deep water raft system allows for soilless growth, so there is no agricultural runoff. The greenhouse method shelters produce for uninhabitable weather by controlling the environment year-round. The natural sunlight is utilized as much as possible, and indoor bulbs support plants' growth during the off-season. Next are the advantages and disadvantages of the BrightFarms supply chain. For the advantages, BrightFarm offers minimal transportation costs and timely deliveries, allowing for harvest to market in less than 24 hours. A stabilized environment allows for year-round production of seasonal produce with up to 3 times traditional production rates. Finally, the produce purchase agreement contracts to ensure future business with retailers. In regards to the supply chain disadvantages, the focus is mainly on local retailers, so you're not focusing on expanding beyond that region. Also, prices are held to a 10-year agreement, so there's not much wiggle room when it comes to changing prices. Finally, the lighting expenses become dependent on local electricity costs. Now, I'll pass it on to Nick to talk about facility and location considerations.
Next, there's facility and location considerations. In regards to the facility, there needs to be rows designated to each type of crop to prevent mix-ups. An irrigation system also needs to be implemented in order to keep the crops watered, and there needs to be an ease of access between rows to make harvesting simpler. There needs to be packaging stations near each row to keep the process flowing as quickly as possible. Whenever there's room between stations, there also needs to be room for forklifts to move within the facility. And finally, there needs to be an ample source of electricity to power the fans for the air circulation and light bulbs for growing in the off-season. In regards to the location considerations, it should be centrally located between the retailers that it's going to be supplying. It needs to be in the community that can provide adequate labor. The infrastructure of the area should be able to support the facility, especially in terms of roads, water, and electricity. The local government needs to be friendly towards incoming business with low taxes. And finally, there needs to be access to medical care, police, and also fire. Next is the forecasting and inventory management and how BrightFarms supply chain differs from traditional produce supply chains. Multiple buyers wanting product at the same time and having to follow through on a 24-hour delivery promise differs greatly from the traditional produce supply chain. In such a controlled environment, BrightFarms will have better understanding of what they can produce. In order for BrightFarms to produce 10 times the normal amount, they have to have a top-grade inventory system. And to continue on with the material challenges, here is Ben.
Alright, with the material challenges that BrightFarms will face, BrightFarms has to be prepared and has to have a lot of trucks ready to deliver the produce. The drivers have to be ready to load and unload constantly at a quick pace. Also, electricity is a huge factor in the off-season. If the greenhouses lose power, then BrightFarms could lose their product. A loss of product will cause stores to not have produce to sell, and this will result in a major loss in revenue. In conclusion, BrightFarms is the future of indoor crop production and will benefit the grocery stores involved and the consumers. With the promise of quick delivery, BrightFarms will deliver the excellent quality and produce that people have been missing out on for years. The cheaper price of BrightFarms lettuce, 73 cents per head, versus $1.18 per head of lettuce from competitors. All of this this puts Bright Farm at a competitive advantage. Now we'd like to open the floor to any questions that you all might have.
And again, we'll take a moment to say thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great day.